There's a professional voice cloning session sitting on a studio's hard drive right now. 3 hours of recorded takes, a deadline in the morning, and every single one of them sounds just slightly off. Not broken, not obviously wrong, just thin, lifeless, like the AI swallowed the voice and forgot to give it back. The producer blamed the microphone. The client blamed the script. But the actual problem was one setting, buried 2 levels deep in the interface, that ships disabled by default, and almost nobody turns it on. We're going to show you exactly what it is, why it exists, what it costs you when it's off, and the specific moment in a session where flipping it changes everything. The tool is ElevenLabs. If you've been anywhere near AI audio production in the last 2 years, you know the name. They're the current benchmark for voice cloning fidelity, and their model runs the backbone of a significant chunk of the commercial AI voiceover market right now. Pricing. The free tier gives you 10,000 characters a month, which is enough to evaluate but not enough to work. The starter plan is $5 a month. Creator is $22. The tier that actually matters for professional workflows, the one with the highest quality model and the audio features we're going to cover today, is the independent publisher plan at $99 a month. There's also an enterprise tier with custom pricing. Who is this for? Audiobook producers, e-learning studios, podcast editors, agencies doing long-form narration or localization at scale, anyone who records a voice clone and then needs it to perform consistently across hundreds of script pages without sounding like it's reading from a teleprompter. Who is it not for? Anyone who needs a $2 per month novelty tool. Anyone doing short, one-off social clips where quality variance doesn't compound. And anyone who hasn't recorded a clean source voice yet because no setting fixes a bad clone foundation. Now, that last point matters for what we're about to show you, because the setting we're covering today is specifically designed for situations where you've already done the hard work of building a good clone, and it's still not performing. Which tool are you currently using for AI voiceover? Drop it below. We want to know what workflows these tests actually need to cover. Here's where most people work inside ElevenLabs. The Projects tab. You paste your script, you assign a voice, you generate. It sounds fine. Competent. Usable, maybe. But if you've been using it this way and wondering why the output feels just slightly robotic on longer passages, this is the workflow that's hiding the problem. The setting we're talking about is called Speaker Boost. It lives inside the Voice Settings panel, which you get to by clicking the gear icon next to your assigned voice inside a project. Not the global voice settings, not the library, the per project voice settings. That distinction matters, because you can have Speaker Boost enabled on a voice globally and still have it off inside a specific project if you never checked. It ships disabled, always. That's not a bug. It's a deliberate default because Speaker Boost increases processing load and generation time. ElevenLabs made a business decision to keep the fast, cheaper output as default. That decision is costing producers takes. Here's what Speaker Boost actually does, mechanically. When you clone a voice, the model captures the speaker's acoustic signature, timbre, pacing tendencies, breath pattern, resonance envelope, but that capture is a compression. Some of the upper harmonic detail and the low frequency body, especially on voiced consonants like B, D, G, and M, gets flattened. The result is a voice that passes a casual listen, but fails the moment a human ear sits with it for more than about 30 seconds. It starts to feel like a photograph of a voice, rather than the voice itself. Speaker Boost runs a secondary pass on the output that specifically reconstructs those suppressed harmonics and reintroduces the low-end body. It doesn't add fake warmth. It restores information that the compression removed. That's not marketing language. That's the mechanism. Listen to that difference on voiced consonants specifically. The word bold, the word model, the word memory. Without Speaker Boost, those words land flat. With it on, there's physical presence behind them. For a 30-second ad read, that gap might not matter. For a chapter of an audiobook or an hour-long e-learning module, it's the difference between a listener staying in and a listener checking their phone. Now here's the part most reviewers stop at. They show you the toggle, they play the comparison, and they move on. We tested it across 3 real production workflows, and the results were not uniform. That's worth understanding before you flip the switch and call it fixed. Workflow 1. A fiction audiobook. 11 chapters, roughly 40,000 words total, using a cloned female narrator voice recorded in a treated home studio. Clean source. Good clone foundation. With speaker boost off, the outputs were consistently usable but required manual EQ in post on about 60% of paragraphs, where sentence energy dropped, typically at the end of long descriptive passages. Generation time averaged about 40 seconds per segment at standard quality. With speaker boost on, the EQ corrections dropped to under 15% of paragraphs. The voice held its body through entire pages without intervention. Generation time went up to about 75 seconds per segment. That's a real cost. But the post-production time saved was significantly larger than the generation time added. Across 11 chapters, the net time saving was approximately 4 hours. If you want every AI audio tool we test against workflows like this one, that's what we cover here every week. Real sessions, real numbers. Workflow 2, a corporate e-learning studio. Short segments, typically between 40 and 150 words each, using a cloned male voice recorded in a professional booth. This is a higher quality source than most users are working with. Here's where it got interesting. On segments under 60 words, Speaker Boost produced almost no audible difference. The compressed model was already handling short utterances cleanly. The additional processing time added roughly 35 seconds per segment, with no meaningful quality return. For a studio generating 300 short segments in a single session, that's over 175 minutes of added generation time buying almost nothing. The recommendation for this workflow: use Speaker Boost selectively. Enable it for segments over 100 words, or for any segment with dense voiced consonants in the script. Disable it for short, punchy instructional lines, where clarity, not warmth, is the output priority. ElevenLabs does not currently offer automated conditional speaker boost inside projects. That's a genuine product gap. You're making per-segment decisions manually, which is workable, but not scalable. If this matters to your pipeline, log it as feedback. They do ship updates. Workflow 3, podcast localization. An English source voice cloned and then used to narrate a Spanish translation of existing episodes. This is one of the harder use cases for any voice cloning platform because the phonetic profile of the target language is different from the training language. With Speaker Boost off, the Spanish output had a specific artifact that you'll recognize if you've worked in localization. Consonant clusters that don't exist in English, like the Spanish TR and doctor combinations, came out with an audible thinness. The voice lost its identity on those clusters. It sounded like a different, lesser version of the speaker. With Speaker Boost on, those consonant clusters recovered significantly, not perfectly, but the voice maintained enough identity through them that the localized audio could stand next to the original English episodes without an obvious quality drop. That's the bar for localization work. Speaker Boost, in this workflow, wasn't a nice to have. It was the difference between deliverable and not deliverable. One limitation we have, to name directly: Speaker Boost does not fix a flawed source recording. We ran a secondary test using a clone built from audio with moderate background noise and room reverb. With Speaker Boost on, the artifacts in the source recording were actually more audible, not less, because the secondary pass enhanced everything, including the problems. If your clone sounds off, fix the source before reaching for this setting. There's also a second angle here that almost no one covers when they talk about Speaker Boost, and it changes the calculus for a specific type of user. The Dubbing Studio workflow, which handles video localization with automatic lip sync approximation, processes voice differently than the project's workflow. Speaker Boost in Dubbing Studio applies at a different point in the generation chain. It runs before the timing compression that syncs the voice to the video duration, not after. That means the harmonic reconstruction happens before the output gets stretched or compressed to hit a time target. In practice, for dubs where the target language runs longer than the source, which Spanish typically does relative to English, the stretched audio retains significantly more of the voice's tonal identity with Speaker Boost on, compared to without it. The degradation curve is flatter. A voice stretched to 120% of its original duration sounds closer to natural with Speaker Boost enabled than a voice stretched to even 110% without it. That's not documented anywhere obvious in ElevenLabs' own materials. We found it through testing. And for anyone doing video localization at volume, that single mechanism is worth the $99 monthly tier on its own. Here's where we land. Who buys today? If you're an audiobook producer, a podcast localizer, or an e-learning studio working with long-form narration segments over 100 words, the independent publisher tier with Speaker Boost enabled is the current best tool in this category. The time savings in post-production are not marginal. They're structural. Who waits? If you're on the creator tier and you're doing short-form content where segments are typically under 60 words, Speaker Boost is not going to move the needle enough to justify the tier upgrade on its own. Wait until you're working at volume or until ElevenLabs ships conditional Speaker Boost so you can automate the decision. Who skips ElevenLabs entirely? If your primary use case is real-time voice conversion during live performance or streaming, Resemble AI and VoiceMod Pro are better fits. ElevenLabs is a generation tool, not a live processing tool. That's not a gap they're trying to fill, and you shouldn't evaluate them against it. One honest caveat: ElevenLabs' terms of service require that you have rights to the voice you're cloning. That's not a footnote. Misuse of voice cloning tools is increasingly the subject of state-level legislation in the United States, including the Elvis Act in Tennessee, signed in 2024, which specifically protects voice likeness rights. Know what you're cloning and confirm you have authorization. That's not just legal protection. It's the kind of professional standard that keeps this technology available. The tool we're covering next is Descript's Underlord suite, specifically the overdub regeneration feature that most users treat as a gimmick, but that post-production editors are quietly building entire correction workflows around. That one's already up. And here's the question we want answered. Have you run into a voice cloning artifact that you couldn't explain and couldn't fix? Drop the specific symptom in the comments. Not just it sounds bad. Tell us what it sounds like. That's the next round of tests.